So, hello everyone, I'm here with Bolu, main man himself, and we have decided that we want to do a little bit of a chat today. So we've got two cameras set up, and
Was it pow?
pow, pow, pow. And yeah, Bolu's an old friend of mine, and we've known each other for what, 7 years now. It feels like. I feel like we knew each other
Since graduating. Yeah.
since graduating, really.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
that's mad, isn't it?
Yeah, that's just made me think about it now.
We're at that point where we're gonna go past actually being new grads or recent grads. So we're probably past it now, to be honest with you. But what I love about Bolu is that he's down to earth. He does a lot of social media and content, and he's an honest, authentic version of himself on social media. So we have really good chats very naturally. And so we thought it was a golden opportunity to just kind of sit down and talk about some veterinary meds and things, and also kind of like a wider scope in veterinary medicine as well. So yeah, man, can't wait to get into it.
I'm buzzing to get stuck in. Let's get stuck. Let's get stuck. Give you some background before I ask you this question.
Yeah.
Obviously, I've broken my leg.
Yeah.
There is a lot going on in the world at the moment now.
Yeah.
And so there is this overwhelming theme of almost helplessness.
Yeah. 100%.
And so I wanted to ask you about, like, when was the last time that you felt helpless?
Wow.
Yeah.
You really led with that one. Felt helpless. Recently, and quite often, to be honest with you. And I think you set the tone really well in the sense that it is such a common feeling, not only as vets and practitioners in the veterinary space and all the things that are going on, whether it's XL bullies or whether we're talking from someone who's vegan and plant-based, you know, that feeling of overwhelming helplessness. And I think that's really, really common. But particularly with the context of the politics of the world at the moment, you know, we're talking about the situation in Gaza, that kind of genuine feeling like wanting to be part of a community where that particular topic is spoken about. And one thing that we do a very good job of is, and people always say this, is that we're extremely authentic and we share a lot about our experiences and the politics beyond just we're vets, you know.
Yeah.
And so that particular discussion that I feel is often missed, just being able to be politically minded is so very recently, like 3-4 days ago, and it's very common. Yeah.
Okay, fair.
How about you?
I think this whole, I want to say 2-3 month period.
Yeah.
Breaking my leg, it's not a big deal. Like, it's not that much of a big deal breaking a leg, but it isn't a big deal because it changes a lot of perspectives. And I went from kind of being active, being go,
super active,
to, like, all of a sudden, I need to sit down in one place. I need to ask people for help. Like, I haven't even talked about this yet on socials, but I've talked about a lot of my friends when I had the conversations. But when I was in the hospital, there was a period when I was in the hospital where I was apologizing to the nurses. I was like, I'm not used to asking people for help. I don't know how to do that, right? So then it just felt like and they were like, you don't have to apologize, like, but just ask us for help when you need it. And I was like, I didn't know how to get that out of me. Yeah. So one of those things, whilst I've been lying in bed, has been reflecting on that. And then, like you said, a lot of the things with politics, a lot of the things with what's going on in the world makes you sometimes feel helpless because you just sometimes feel like you're not getting your message across. Like, I think there's one thing that I like to say a lot for people is that human beings, we need to be seen, heard, and understood. Seen for who we really are, heard for what we really mean, and understood for what we're trying to actually get across, right? And that can only come when somebody authentically sits with you, right? Which is for me the reason why I will share my social media in a way that's so authentic. Say it's authentic, but it's just being me, right? Because I want you to understand what I mean. Like, I want to share what drives me, what I'm passionate about, and hope that you might feel the same way. And then you can and then we can associate as a tribe, or then we can associate as a community, right? And then you can understand where I'm coming from when I'm talking about something, why this affects me in this way, or why this hurts me, or why I should feel a certain way about it. And it happens on a small scale as friends. You do it with your friends, like, you know, you have those small conversations where, you know,
It's a little bit here, it's a little bit there, but you're not always getting to the bottom of it.
Exactly, and you understand each other, right? And I think you want it to be on a bigger scale sometimes when you have a platform where you have a community, that you want people to understand you that same way and share that kind of vulnerability with them, and also share the things that you're passionate about. And so, yeah, I mean, this 2 months, I have had this feeling of helplessness, and that's a weird thing to feel, as I'm normally quite a strong and like, oh, I'll get it done, like, but there is a helplessness.
If it needs to be done, you'll do it.
But now I'm like, what this injury has done for me is that it's allowed me to sit with it and know that it's not one of the things that's going to last for long, but I can overcome it and I will overcome it. But I'm just like, let's go through the motion. So during this period, that was what's going to bring me on to the next part. Was like, one of the things I used to reflect was, what do I need right now in this period of like helplessness? And I think a lot of it was community.
Yeah.
And talking.
And community is something that helps you put into perspective about what you actually value. And I think, you use a really good example with regards to the nurses, and asking for help and not having to be that person on the other side. And, it does make you reflect about, like, who was I before this happened? Was I someone who had the skill set, or the person who could always kind of push through and do those type of things? Or was I someone that was struggling to ask for help and felt like I needed to do it myself over and over and over?
Yeah.
And I think it's a testament to the person that you are, that you would use this opportunity to really reflect. And I guess you've been forced into it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You can't help but have something as, I use this word lightly, catastrophic as what we saw.
Yeah.
But and then be faced with a situation where something which I see personally as a big part of who you are, training, being able to exercise is integral to the person that you are. It's integral to me, but I feel like for you it's even bigger facet, and how hard you apply yourself to exercise. It's very hard to have what feels like everything to go to that particular point. And I imagine that it would be a difficult transition for you. But again, you've used this opportunity to draw back, to reflect, and I'm incredibly proud of you using that time to do that. But it is like, coming back to the community that you said, what I have found on and off difficult in the veterinary community is this kind of, sometimes I feel like I'm centered, like I'm here, like and I found you, I found Mahesh, I found loads of other people, and the list is endless. But at the same time, it's like, does the wider veterinary community reflect me? And do I need it to? And all of that. So it's I get it. It's this kind of weird balance between community and helplessness, and flip-flopping between them.
Yeah. And I really like asking the question of, like, does the community reflect you? Does the community reflect you? When you were speaking about the community, right? For me, there was an angle of deconstruction there. So, again, background, I have been deep in my bell hooks bag. This past 2 weeks, I have been, like, because already, I like bell hooks, phenomenal author. Bell hooks, Audre Lorde, like, you're talking about OGs, Toni Morrison, you're about
60s
OGs.
and 70s.
And bell hooks passed, I think it was 2 years ago now. And I was just going back through a lot of her talks with the new school. And a lot of it is on deconstruction, right? On a wider sense and on a more micro sense as well. And when you're talking about community, you can't help but think about the deconstruction of self. So when you were explaining how I've come to reckon with my movement and gym and everything being such a big facet of myself, and then all of a sudden I have that taken away from me, I have to deconstruct myself as to who I am underneath that. Who's the Bolu behind that side of it, Like, what am I without my movement, or how do I cope without that movement, or what does it even take away from me, right? Because I had to recognize that one of my freedoms was now taken away from me. What does that leave me as an individual? And so that was really interesting to kind of introspect in that way. And when we deconstruct the veterinary community, there's so many of us with so many different facets, and we're so multi-layered as individuals. It's something that I think just needs a bit of like a magnifying glass on top of it. And I kind of wanted to ask you, like,
Well, how do I feel about
Yeah,
it?
no, well, not just how you feel about it. I want to see you deconstruct yourself.
Okay.
Like, you know,
I get
because
it.
you're multi-layered, right? So
Yeah.
you are a multi-layered individual. What does deconstruction look like in Fabian? Like, what does it mean to you as well? What does the word, in fact, yeah, top layer.
What does it mean to
What
you?
does the word deconstruction mean to you?
I think if we're talking in the context that we're talking about, I think deconstruction means that we're happy to break down the elements of who we think we are and really work out if those are the foundation stones of that person that we're making. And I guess from my reading, there's always two ways to look. There was more than two ways, but there's two main ways that I feel are very easy ways to look at it. And one way is that when you're born, or when you start something, not just born, when you start something, there is like this block, this like, I don't know, let's call it, a block of ice where you always get those kind of special sculptures.
Yeah.
And you kind of chip away. And each time you have an experience, you're like chipping away to reveal the finished version of yourself at any point, right? And that's one way of looking at it. And the other way is that ultimately, the only thing that defines who you are your past experiences. So the future is an unknown. You know, tomorrow we could be doing X, Y, Z, or we may not even, being on the morbid side, we may not be here. But the idea is that your story is the things that you've done, is the past. And so instead of being like this unearthed sculpture that you're moving towards, or this thing that you're doing is this unearthed sculpture, let's just pause.
Yeah, no, that's right.
The other thing, with regards to this unearthed sculpture, like, are you that person and you're moving towards it, or are you always just adding from the ground up? So you're nothing and you're adding a block and you're adding a block and adding a block. So either of those things can work. With regards to me, who are my elements? I once, when I was young, thought that being a vet would be one of my things. Now I realise that at root, caring for people and allowing the people the space, and we've spoken about this a lot, the space to be curious about the world around you is so important. And as long as I'm giving other people the opportunity to do the things that they're passionate about and interested about, that's all I'm asking for. And it makes it much, much easier for me to focus myself and apply myself and work out what's important. Ultimately, everyone needs to have a fair chance to live a full life. And that in that process, I make an effort to care for people. And that's really it. And what that has allowed me as an individual is the space to not just see myself as a vet or see myself as an exercise enthusiast or someone who likes to read books. It's just someone who likes to live life sharing and being curious about things and learning new things. And so that means if I wasn't doing veterinary medicine today or tomorrow, I'd still have a lot to give the world. That's how I see it.
You see yourself, because from what I'm hearing, it sounds like you see yourself as a facilitator. You're helping, and it's kind of, I can only say it because it almost feels like a mirror, because in the same way, it's like, you kind of help people realize that you what's the word I'm looking for? Yeah, you help people realize their potentiality through being an example yourself. So showing your multi-dimensions and your different natures allows you to help so many people. And it's the same way in which I do my thing of like, this is me, this is what I do, and I hope that you can also do the same thing there. So, okay.
We don't have to be pigeonholed. Like, we just don't. And it's something that I say a lot and you say a lot, is that we are people. And I think coming into veterinary medicine, especially as black men, as black men coming into veterinary medicine, I didn't know a single person I could use as a framework to look at entirely. Like, I would pick one thing from one thing and one thing from there, but we had no traditional role models in that sense. That space that I knew of that I could look to. Now, there are people in America, but in the UK, there was no one as a reference point that I really could look to. And that's changed over the last 5 years, and I'm over the moon by that. But what we were doing was building a framework for the people that which we didn't have.
Okay. Question. Coming in, I know you're going to go on one, but I'm going to now steer it in, Question. When you came into the veterinary community, or like, let's say you graduate, or even before then you come into the veterinary community, because you're doing work experience from young. So when you come into the veterinary community, what things did you have to unlearn?
What I had to unlearn is that veterinary medicine was going to give me contentment, full stop.
Okay.
And what I learned when I went on the degree is that I'm not going to enjoy everything.
Yeah.
And what I learned on the degree is that a lot of people in veterinary medicine are just people, and they're allowed to be people. And I wasn't necessarily going to find my community just because we all liked animals. What I had to unlearn was that ultimately the uni experience and the veterinary experience is just a microcosm of society. And I thought, in a weird way, that having done sixth form and school, which is like a mini society as far as I'm concerned, that type of thing continues, and that my journey still was my own journey. And it was a huge amount of learning to realize that, I thought effectively veterinary medicine, yeah, we all like animals to a certain extent, but our version of liking animals is different. Our experiences and our expectations of that process were going to be very different. And ultimately, I found the community that I wanted to look for and share in. I still had to do the work to go and find. And that has been the best, but also quite an earth-shattering thing, because, like I said, I found you, I found Mahesh, I found a bunch of other people who in veterinary medicine I didn't have at the start of that process. And I'm over the moon that I found what I will regard my town, my village, my community in veterinary medicine. But at the same time, it was like, I kind of thought I was going to walk into that.
Like, coming off the back of you were talking about community,
Yep.
and finding your community within here, and like the vet part isn't the only soul encompassing thing as well, and it's interesting because being authentically yourself, I think you start to realize how so many more people have things in common with you.
Yep.
And like how you start to align yourself with people.
Yep.
Like just now as an example, right? Somebody coming over to you to tell you how much they enjoy your content, they enjoy your stuff, because they relate to you not just on a veterinary basis, but there's things that you're putting up. Well, I don't know, I'm speaking for her now, but there's things that you're putting up that
You'd like to
make
think.
her feel like, yeah, you'd like to think, will make her feel like that you're part of the tribe. But then that's another side of, I guess, the unlearning, where you think that you're part of the same tribe, but then you realize the morals aren't the same, or the values aren't necessarily the same.
I feel like we have so much of a capacity to represent. Do you know what? We're just very good at sharing an honest depiction that people don't feel comfortable sharing, but also at the same time, we share beyond just the remit of what people think we should be doing. And so what I would say is that you share things for lots of people in the veterinary community, and I share things for lots in the veterinary community. But actually what we're looking for is that we're in a community where several or a lot of those different values are shared.
Yeah.
That is where the community thing does change, because I can talk to you about pretty much anything.
Yeah.
But I can't talk to everyone here about pretty much everything.
Exactly.
And I think that's the ultimate difference. And I think it's so important that we get the opportunity to share those little topics here, but actually, who are the people that I want to share?
But yeah, it's the truth about community is having somebody that shares multiple of your values.
Right.
You can't have the same conversation with everybody, and I think so. Now this is where deconstruction even gets even heavier, right? Because why is that the case? And so that's now talking to a wider audience. Yeah, why is it the case that you guys can see me as a vet, but you can't see me as a black man, or you may not be able to relate to my struggles as a black man, or you can't see my colleagues who are black women, or chronically ill, or disabled, whatever facet of oppression is affecting somebody. Why is it that some communities struggle more than others in order to understand it, right? Now, on a bell hook standpoint, Miss Hooks,
Citation.
and I cannot say that I've been listening to bell hooks all week without mentioning white supremacist, imperialist, capitalist patriarchy, right? And it's this idea. Bell hooks is all about decentering the conversation from just the main people, the main perpetrators that we think they are, but that everybody is complicit, right?
Complicit.
We're all complicit because in myself I have inherent racist tendencies, and that's where the white supremacy comes in. There are European standards that I will conform to. There are standards that are self-hating that I will conform to, as well as me being a man and benefiting off the patriarchy, as well as me being a locum and benefiting off capitalism. You know what I'm saying? As well as, you know, you're looking at the imperialist culture of veterinary medicine, like, you know, there's so many things that I will lend myself into, that I become complicit to, and I think that's something that in the vet community we haven't done enough self-examination to deconstruct ourselves as to where we're all complicit and how we are
partakers in something which doesn't help many of us. And I think the thing is, we're going on to that topic. If we're talking about capitalism, and we're talking about the work, I mean, we're in an example of a wonderful space where there is community. At the same time, there is a backdrop of creating products and selling products and competing and trying to, without being rude, try and not even force products on people, but push people to consume. And I think, and one thing that I've known, if we draw it back to the idea of, you know, being black or being from a underprivileged community or struggling with that, is that how these communities actually, how are they driven to actually care for the experiences that we have? And I think the problem is, and we've seen a lot of it, is that a lot of the types of bids for, I don't know, what's the right word? I guess like bids to show the community, the underprivileged community, the chronic illness, whatever, that they actually do care for us, sometimes feels very tokenistic. And I think that, and you're absolutely right, we are part of that because we benefit from those privileges. And if we're not making super efforts to even almost undermine or change the narrative on those things, then actually we are part of it. When we talk about the idea of virtue signaling and not actually doing the work and making sure that we're part of something without the actual work that comes with it.
Yeah.
The Black Square, Black Lives Matter, the peak of lockdown and the pandemic and all the other things going on is a perfect example.
Yeah.
And I think what we need to understand is that, like, veterinary medicine is a microcosm of society. But what I find difficult is that we have a lot of people in the veterinary space who are, Bolu, you're doing amazing things, you're showing the other side of veterinary medicine, and you're a black man, but you're happy to talk about things, you're honest, you are vulnerable, and you do all these amazing things. And yet when it comes to actually the work that's required in the background to alleviate that stress, so it's not all burden on you.
Yeah, exactly. Take off the pressure.
To take off the pressure, because it's work.
Yeah.
It's work for you to have to be that person because no one else is doing it. It's like well, Bolu's doing it. And it's like, well, no, actually, there's a bigger picture here. And the same for me, like, you know, calling out people for whatever X, Y, and Z. When we're calling about the context of that type of work, that's what we want to see.
Yeah.
That's what we want to see. And we know we have Affinity Futures, you know, and we have BVEDs and all these things who are trying to make that change within veterinary practices to do that. But the problem is, at the root of this, is that if your main aim is to grow as a business, profit comes over people so often.
100%, yep.
Like none of these people here, most of them, are like non-profit. Mm-hmm. So how do we, at any point, as vet practitioners, as people in the veterinary community, really fit within the community when at the back of our mind we're aware that profit comes over humanity quite often?
Yeah, exactly.
It's difficult. It's really difficult. I mean, I have a question for you. Like, how do you, considering how much reading you have done and are doing, and you're like a bookworm.
When I want to be.
When you want to be. It's not enough. But when you do read, you really read.
Yeah.
Like, how do you have like a day-to-day, I'm just going to get through this type mantra, or are you always followed by all these thoughts and ideas that you've read? Like, how do you navigate a veterinary space?
Yeah. Oh.
And like, how do you do that knowing what you know?
That's a really challenging question because I'm thinking, okay, so if I just answer as it comes to my head,
Take time.
a man who knows everything is crazy. And the more I read, the more I start to understand that premise.
Yeah.
The more you know, hyper-awareness becomes crippling.
Yeah.
Like it really becomes crippling because especially when you introspectively look within yourself and you're like, how am I benefiting from certain things? How am I being ignorant about certain things? Like, what am I being like remiss about? And what am I being blasé about in the world? And then what am I actually focusing my attention to? And you're like, actually, I want to be a better person. I want to care for more people. So you go and do the reading in those areas, right? And when you do the reading in the areas, and when you have the penny drop moments, when you read a sentence and it's like, oh, actually, society is society because it's a mirror of each and every one of us. You're like, oh, what? We are all complicit in patriarchy. Oh, wow. We all have white supremacist biases. Oh, me too as a black man. Yeah. I also have white supremacist biases. Huh? I'm also putting down black women.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, all these chips. Yeah, and then you start feeling flat. I can't lie to you. I can't lie to you. Sometimes when I read a book, I have to sit there, or sometimes in some books I have to pause whilst I'm reading, because as you're reading it, it comes in so heavy, quickly, and you're like, and even if we're talking about the state of the world right now, like, you know, you're talking about Congo. What's happening in Congo right now, right this moment, people are fighting for coltan, which is what causes cobalt, which is what's used in the cameras that we use, the iPhones that we use, the cars we drive, you know what I mean? And it's like, hold on, I'm part of this. And then that's what the overwhelmed bit was. And that takes us back to the helplessness that I was talking about at the beginning, right? That in that moment, as soon as I started getting deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper and learning stuff, I'm like, do you know how deeply complicit I am? It's even as simple as what people talk about, like, you know, how you talk about veganism. And me, the first time I realized that I was over-consuming and tried to move myself into that reducitarian, flexitarian, whatever you want to call it, manner, was when I stopped having a chicken every day for lunch. And I was like, yo, I ate a chicken every day for lunch. That's crazy. So how I deal with that, so first off, the first part is making myself aware first, so I know the stuff. Once I'm aware, it is easy to fall into the trend of being helpless and to almost feel despair and despondency. But then I had this conversation with my brother where I was saying that that's what a lot of the people who are in power want you to feel. Because we're talking about a dominant culture where a select few people have the power and they control a lot of our decisions. And the problem arises where if the masses unite and understand each other and they all work together like a hive or a colony, they overtopple because numbers outweigh people all the time. So if democracy was true, we'd outweigh people, right? So coming back to it is that I don't want to, when you start to feel that despair, one, it means that you're aware, but two, it means that you should need to keep going. So there is one aspect of, do I just drudge through it? I do. Some days it will be a drudging through it. Like, you know, some days I won't pick my head up, but I'll keep moving forward. It feels very dark, but I will acknowledge the darkness at that time. Like, you know, it's like, oh, I feel crap today because I'm so hyper aware of everything that's going on. But in order for me to do right by all those people that I am, like, you know,
rooting for,
supporting, or wanting to support, or wanting to help, I have to keep going forward, right? I have to keep going forward, but with my newfound awareness, right? Because you learn from where you were before each time. That's how life is. As you grow, you learn. That's the whole point of growth, right? So as I keep moving forward, I'm moving forward with a new awareness that, oh, actually, I don't have to eat a chicken every day. Oh, actually, vegan chicken's not so bad. Yeah. Or actually, my phone contract's run out. I don't need to get the next iPhone 17 or whatever. I can chill this phone because it's serving me justice. I can reduce my impact. Oh, this is lending to this sort of oppression. This one's lending to this oppression. You know, like, if there is a lift and everybody's waiting for it, somebody there could be disabled. I don't need to do that. Why don't I need to? You know what I'm saying? It's especially when I broke my leg and I'm sitting there in the midst of seeing stuff. maybe I should be considerate that the person who's walking slow in front of me might have a disability that I cannot see. So I've now moved past the point of where I previously was, where I was ignorant to it, and I've learned it now, and I keep moving forward. So some days it is on despair. Some days you are just dredging through it. Some days it's optimism, because you will join rallies, or you'll join protests, or you'll meet like-minded people, and you'll feel like you're contributing to change, or you might help change somebody's life, or you might change somebody's mind, sorry. You could change somebody's life, but change somebody's mind just through a conversation. Yeah. That feels that positive optimism. And then some days it's like, okay, well, let's just, I might just go back to being a bit ignorant for something. Especially when it comes to the capitalism side. I think the capitalism one is the easiest one for me to be remiss about everything else that's going on, because that's what directly benefits me. It's easy to be a capitalist. I've got money in the bank, it's easy to be a capitalist, right? That's the whole premise, right? But then you just but the fact that you've learned and you spent time learning of this is what my capitalism is doing to other people. This is where my money is going. This is where my tax money is going. This is where this is going. You start to have a newfound opinion going forward. So I think the big thing for me on how I deal with that is always move forward, but move forward with the information I've learned, and then navigate the world a bit. You can't solve every problem.
What you don't want to do is be what I have said about many people, is that willful ignorance, being gifted that information or having the opportunity to make the most of that information and know it's there and still avoid it. Mm-hmm. And I find that more frustrating, because there's a reason that people willfully ignore information. It's because they either can't be bothered, mm-hmm. or, which I think is probably more common, is that they know that that is going to challenge them to make a change, or at least be aware of the change that they're going to have to make. Mm. And that in itself, and that willful ignorance, is probably the biggest problem that we have. Because and that's the thing about giving other people and other beings the humanity that they deserve, including us, and not seeing us as just these cool, vets, these black vets, and they're doing something different and they're being is actually that taking on that knowledge that we had to do this in absence of other people doing it, and that requires work. And that facilitating a space for us to not have to, I've always said this, it doesn't have to be me, as long as it's somebody.
Yeah.
And if it's not going to be anybody, then I will do what I can.
Yeah.
But I'm here for not just it's not about me, it's about making that change that feels materially worthwhile going forward. And and that's why I'm such a big fan of yours, because it is very much that you fill a space that is required desperately for people to see a version of you. And you walk around here and people recognize you, but I know at heart that it's not because you get to be that person who's well known. You do it because you started it, and you continue to do it because you like sharing, you have a passion about it. But ultimately, being visible is such an important part of an experience that we didn't have access to, and it just comes back to that, really. And you're absolutely right, we are complicit, but the most important thing is to not think that if we are complicit, that in some way that we can't do something about it.
Yeah.
It is really, really, really difficult. But you know what? These conversations and allowing people to see the real us and show that we're aware of these things, and we do all the things in spite of the things that are happening in the background, is work. And as long as people celebrate that, we'll celebrate them for their contributions and things like that.
And it's the same thing of so you see how we do these things, like you said, we're just sharing our passions with a wider audience. Yeah. When you're friends with somebody, when you're really good friends with somebody, and you see something afflict them, you want to know how to make it better, or you want to look after them or whatever, right? That is allyship in its nature of I see you struggling because you're my good friend, or because I'm such a fan of your work. How can I make it better? Or how can I even understand what you're coming to grips with? And I think that's a big thing of for me to feel valued in the community, what I'd want is people in that community to actually care Like, oh, like, you get some people talk about the conversation of, oh, why is it always going to come down to race? And and truth be told, a lot of times in my life I used to try and navigate systems of like, oh, I don't really have to talk about race. I don't want to talk about race. Da, da, da. But then you realise, no, everything does come down to it. Like, it does come down to it. And if you don't see it, if you don't understand why it comes down to it, that's where it's like, oh, let me do some reading to figure out why that is. Let me do some reading to figure out why I am inherently problematic, or why I have a privilege or a freedom or whatever it may be, you know what I mean? And as a friend or as a consumer or a follower or whatever, sometimes you want to look at what the person who you're admiring, or the person you might be putting on a pedestal, or the person you might be looking at this stuff or inspired by things, you might be looking at, how do I ease a load for them, or how do I, help make their world dream, because you align with them because their world dream might be similar to yours, but how do I make their world dream realized? Like, how do I, if I'm talking about that, I want us all to, if you're talking from a space of you want to be a facilitator for everybody to achieve their potentiality, me as Bolu, how do I look at your stuff and then be like, oh, I want to help Fabian do the facility, oh, it's living in my purpose, or it's living in my authentic self. You get what I mean? And it's that kind of thing of like, if I ask you a question, how would you want the people who consume your footage, or how would you want the people that you're in proximity with, like, let's say, even in this space that we're in now, how would you want the people to react? What is it that you want from them?
Do you know what I want from people is I saw something not too long ago, and someone said there's like 5 ways to make content. One where it's like laughing content, one of it's like this, and like there's different types. And I realized, I was watching this video and I was like, who am I within that? And I realized very quickly that even though I make content which is educational and blah, 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 a lot of the content that I make at root is challenging people.
Yeah.
I do a lot of challenging.
You're good at it as well.
And I challenge people to think differently. And that is like the main essence of what I do. And I think that challenge is something that lives within me, because I have a certain style of challenging people to think bigger than themselves.
Where do you think that comes from, by the way?
Where does it come from?
Yeah. Why, like, because, for instance, I realized that for trauma or when it comes to heavy topics, I can't really combat it too well. I freeze. Yeah. Some people are fight, some people flee. I freeze. In heavy scenarios, in my work I can handle that, and that's not a heavy scenario to me, but in certain things, in moments of conflict, I'm less likely to challenge. I'm more likely to freeze. And I've noticed it now.
Yeah. And that's kind of, that's, yeah.
Where do you think you're innate?
Do you know what it is? I think it's funny, when I was growing up, I was conflict averse. Like, I hated conflict. I was the kid in year 5 that if a teacher told me off for a minor thing, I'd burst into tears, genuinely.
Yeah.
And it took a lot of work as a young kid to realize that not every type of conflict is the end of the world. And I think coming from a West Indian household, shouts out to mum, from a West Indian household, that it's important that, do you know what? Let's just say West Africa, West Indian, there's a lot of crossover. But it's important that you are not compliant, but that you are willing to be led by authority, without it necessarily being the end of the world. And so I think for me is that, as someone who was always keen to like impress and was a bit of a golden boy in primary school at least, whenever someone created conflict, I found it very difficult. Ironically now, I still don't like conflict, but I am happy to have conflict within a space which is not heated. So in an emotionally calm debate, intense but calm, I can deal with like it's nothing.
You like constructive conflict?
I like constructive conflict.
That's the heavenly side of it, right? Because the reality is like not everybody. A constructive conflict, I feel like you can count the amount of times it happens on your finger, right? Because more time when you call people out. Baby's in there. You're ready to go to war.
I think it comes from a sense that I know in that particular arena, I can hold myself together enough. And I feel like there is a duty to do it. And so I've kind of gone through many, many times of practice of saying, this is my duty to the people that I care for. And so I'm challenging, and it's a word that you use a lot, the zeitgeist. I'm challenging the mainstream. I'm challenging the accepted ethos regularly because I feel at root it is unable to protect us all. And if it's unable to protect us all, we're not giving people enough space to be curious and have the space to realize their own potential. I see that as my responsibility.
And what I got from that there as well is you taking that responsibility because it's within your capability to do so, right? And it's that kind of thing of, it's almost like this is going to Bible because I was raised Christian, but you know, like we're talking about tithes, when people give 10% of their money, their income monthly, right? And somebody challenged Jesus, one disciple challenged Jesus that what about a rich woman and a poor woman going to church, you know? Like the poor woman can't give as much as a rich woman, but it's within her capability of what she's giving. It's about the act, right? And you've also come to a point where it's like, you are able to withstand that pressure. It's almost like you're standing in front of people like, oh, I can take it for you, man, because you, man, might not be able to take it. So let me, because it's within my capability, so also what I'm hearing, that you have your limits as well. which is great to me, because I look at you like, oh, Fabian's out here fighting. And like, go on, Fabian, I'm rooting for you. But you two within yourself have your limits of like, I can only take this many slashes to the chest, you know what I mean? And then I'm gonna step back. Which changed something in my mind, because in my mind I just think, well, I don't always think, but you think that you're just gonna blaze through. But you also have your limits, which is what makes sense, because you're human, you're gonna have your limits, right? And then some people don't. And I think what's so remarkable about that is that you recognize your limit, you recognize that your limit is higher than others, and so you took that responsibility of like, this is my onus. And it's the same thing of when we talk about anything. When you have certain privileges, certain strengths, it's your duty to use your strengths to help those that don't have the strengths. It's the same thing of when we talk about speaking out. It's your duty to speak out for those who have no voice. You've waited for a point of which, like you said, when you were younger, you didn't have that voice. And as you grew up, you grew into your voice. You had the strength to be like, okay, I can challenge it. And I rate that, yeah.
And I genuinely have, and know I have the capability. And I know people have seen it too. And I think, do you know what it is? In the context of my family, if I think about my brother, my brother is legally trained, my mom's legally trained, and you know, that type of robust conversation is not something that I've always had it in my household.
Yeah.
And so if there's any better training arena, it's the family you're growing into.
100%, 100%. If I learned how to argue, it's because me and my brother's the only person in this world that can make me full-blown angry. Because he knows how to push my buttons. So now I know how to deal with that anger. Yeah. But he's also one of the only people in the world that will make me look so introspectively with myself that, Bolu, actually that's wrong. Because I'm so used to so many other people telling me, oh, no, right.
And we need, ironically, any type of relationship that you care about needs that person who can challenge you. And you know what, and the reason why you're able to be challenged is because you care about what they say, you care about what they think.
100,
and, you know, that ultimately that is the role I'm trying to facilitate for people in the veterinary community, is that all of you guys at root know I'm a nice person.
Yeah.
But if I have to tell you to fix up, I'm going to do it in a way that's not directed directly as you and you're a bad person, you should go and start like self-flagellating in the street and throwing tomatoes at you and all that. But actually, here's a golden opportunity, here's the information. Yeah. I'm going to tell you that you are, like you said, complicit in something.
Yeah.
And I'm going to make it so clear that even though you don't have to be out in the streets, like I said, self-flagellated, actually, you're gonna have to go home with that information and think about it. And I think, you know, I'm gonna rub some people the wrong way, but the problem is that when I come correct, as you know, I will come correct. And there's gonna be a really deeply investigated bed that backs it up, you know?
And also I feel like when you're doing it as well, especially when you're going into that, holding a mirror to somebody's face, you're working within a circle of your competence, right? I am not going to talk to somebody about an impression that I do not understand, you know what I mean? Or something that I haven't done any work on, or that I can't.
Done the reading.
You know what I mean? You know, done the work, like truly done the work. And it's a big thing about work as well, because work is very self-evident. Like it speaks for itself.
Yeah.
When you've read a lot, or you've read into a plight, or read into anything, it shows.
Yeah.
So you don't have to profess it off the top of your chest. Like it will show in how you negotiate, provided that you've, like we said before, provided that you've taken what you've learned and moved forward with that and grown, it shows. So you don't have to be but then that's where you bring your confrontation out in terms of like, okay, well, I've learned this, but I'm going to argue within my circle of competence that, you know, you need to do better here. This is a light work conversation, I'm telling you right now. We're trying our hardest to hold back. I think, to be honest, we need to do like a full feature length where we just sit down and we talk.
I need to buy some more SD cards.
I got the way I run through them.
I think today is a really good, it's like a pilot episode, to be honest with you, because it feels like today was about working out the speed that me and Bolu can do for hours. And what I've learned and what I loved about this conversation is that we're able to do it, it's natural, and like you said at the start, it's not about being persecuted, it's not about being judged, it's about being honest and authentic and sharing something, and you know, it's been an absolute pleasure. So thank you very much, and we'll chop this up and see how everyone likes it and take it from there.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me.
No worries.